What's up, everyone? Welcome to Among the Fence, my YouTube channel where I do music reviews. My name is Aaron, and today we're going to be checking out the new album Divisive by the band Disturbed. Divisive is their 8th studio album since they formed in 1994, and their first album they released, which was titled The Sickness, has one of the most famous nu metal songs ever written titled Down with the Sickness. No matter how cheesy you think it is, and no matter how poorly it is aged, you just can't help but to get pumped up for that intro that builds up into the ooh, ah, 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 followed by one of the most nastiest riffs ever written. Admittedly, this is basically where my musical knowledge ends for Disturbed, so this is actually my first time listening to a Disturbed album in full. I was tempted to go back and listen to some of their earlier work, but I figure that most other reviewers will be comparing this album to their other albums, such as like The Sickness or 10,000 Fists, and I thought it would be fun to review this without having the bias of nostalgia and comparing it to other stuff. I'm just going into this, listening to this album, like, I mean, of course I know what Disturbed sounds like, and I assume that's kind of just how they sound across all their albums. But yeah, I'm going into this not even knowing what their last album sounded like, so let's get into it. The album opens up with the song Hey You, which is basically a wake-up call to how divided we can be, especially after the lockdown when we were pretty much all completely consumed by social media. It's got a good build-up into a heavy riff with one of the most recognizable vocals in all of nu metal, hard rock, or even like heavy metal, I would say. I really like the melody in the pre-chorus and in the chorus. It's just super uplifting. The lyrics are alright. I mean, there's some good metaphors thrown in there, but there's nothing that's like, I don't know, like brilliant or anything. The bridge is pretty repetitive, but the more I listen to it, the more it just got the point across of what it was really trying to say. The next two songs I feel like are pretty much about the same thing. It's Bad Man and Divisive. I feel like Bad Man is pretty obvious who it's about. It's got a pounding drum passage in the verse and it flows really well. It matches the vocal cadence. The chorus is a decent hook to it, but I feel like the main takeaway, the main focal point of this song is the enunciation on the phrase bad man and all the other words and phrases that rhyme with it. It's kind of cheesy at times, but it kind of works because it's Disturbed, but also it's kind of repetitive. And because of that, it's easy to get lost in the song and just lose interest. And the title track, Divisive, again, I feel like it's about the same subject matter. It has this sort of instrumental sounding riff. The vocals really come alive to me in the verses, and the enunciation in the chorus is again, but yet again, kind of cheesy. The solo has plenty of wall pedal usage that takes you back to the early, or I guess the mid 90s to the early 2000s of nu metal. It's just a more straightforward song. There's no like flair to it. There's not that Disturbed kind of thing. I mean, the vocals are sort of there, but otherwise nothing else really stood out to me that much. I did enjoy the song Unstoppable a little bit more than the title track. It's got a quick vocal delivery that matches the music. The chorus separates itself by becoming a little bit more stompy, and now the vocals are more drawn out, a little bit longer sounding. Also, the phrase I am unstoppable is pretty catchy. The post-chorus bridge thing had a really cool riff at the beginning and the end of it that I enjoyed quite a bit. Then we have the song Love to Hate, which the music in the verse is really bouncy. The lyrics are just dead on with how people treat each other, especially after the pandemic, where most conversations were over the internet. It's just, yeah, people were just very hateful. And it's actually one of the reasons why I am personally no longer really on Facebook, and I'm also kind of pulling away from Instagram as well. It just isn't, it's just a really toxic place to be. And at this point in the album is when I started to realize that most of the choruses are kind of the same, almost, yeah, pretty much exactly the same. And the next two songs are probably the most unique on this album, and one of them I liked a lot. Another one I feel like it didn't really work out that well. And I'm pretty sure that majority of you are probably going to disagree with me on this, which is totally fine. But Feeding the Fire is probably my favorite song on this album just because of the vocal change, especially at this point in the album. It still has like that Disturbed feel to it. It's just a little bit deeper, and it doesn't have the silly enunciations that Disturbed is known for. And it just, I don't know, the whole song, even the music, is a lot more chill. The chorus has a completely different sound from all the other choruses. It's not trying to be huge and epic. It's not forced. It just works. Even the O's in their interlude which I usually don't really care for all that much. I mean they were good and it worked as well. And then we have the song Don't Tell Me featuring Ann Wilson. And it starts out with like this ballady kind of thing, and the chorus has a lot of vocal isolation to it, at least the first time around. And then Ann Wilson is featured in the second verse, and her voice just doesn't do it for me. It's too low. It's almost like she's trying too hard to match his vocal tone, and it just doesn't work. David's vocal tone is just too unique, and when you have somebody else in there who is, like I said, it's almost like she's trying to match it. And then when they have like their little duet thing, it creates more of like a layering effect to his voice instead of having her voice creating more color to it. Like she should have just let her voice do what it does instead of trying to match it. I don't know, maybe that's just what she sounds like. But to me, this song was just, I'm sure people love it just because of how different it was, especially at the midpoint in the album, but it wasn't good for me. Take Back Your Life brings the energy back up for the last half of the album, which is where I kind of feel like this thing falls apart a little bit. I do like how the synth adds just a little bit of color behind the music. The chorus is really big and triumphant, of course. The only part that really stood out to me, like really at all in this song, was the bridge. However, I feel like it would have been better if they just kept it going and it flowed straight into the chorus. Instead, they do a little break thing to build the suspense going back in the chorus, make it feel, again, big and triumphant. But it would have been sick if they just kept it flowing. It just, it would have brought the heat. It would have been so much better. Then in the song Part of Me, where the echoes at the end of every single line in the verse is just a little too overdone. It's too predictable and a little too cliche. The chorus, however, has a fantastic hook to it. And in general, for me, I felt like this was the best music on the album. I mean, the breakdown was super sick, and we got that iconic kind of vocal thing that David does. It sounded really good. Then we have the closing track, Won't Back Down. This is, I know I made a big deal about Don't Tell Me not being that good of a song, but Won't Back Down is absolutely by far the worst song on this album. Has a riff that reminds me a lot of Rammstein, which is kind of good. The chorus is extremely cliche, as are most of the lyrics and most of the music, even in the verses. The breakdown does make this song a little bit more interesting, but otherwise this is a fairly boring closing track that just, I don't know, honestly it could have ended with any other song, even just an instrumental, I feel like, and it would have been a better closing track. I feel like everything good about this album is pretty much confined to this band. Most of the riffs were enjoyable, and the drums had some standout moments in just about every single song. The vocals are exactly what you would expect from Disturbed, so if you don't like the vocals, you probably just don't like Disturbed. I personally don't really care for the vocals that much or the enunciations that he uses, but again, it's Disturbed. It's what you're going to get when you listen to the band, so I'm not really judging anything based off of them sounding like the band that I'm listening to. The production was solid as well, and I really enjoyed the effects that they put on the music. Sometimes they give a little bit of something that gives it like an industrial flavor to the nu metal style, and other times they would take away all the effects, and I feel like the production even kind of backed off a little bit too, making the music sound more raw, more heavy metal at times. And I noticed this on just my first time listening to it, and I enjoyed pretty much all the music on all of the songs. As for the stuff I didn't enjoy, I feel like the same sort of thing could be said. It's basically just confined to this band and even this genre. Like most of the choruses sound exactly the same. They got kind of boring after like the fifth song or so, but I wouldn't really call it lazy songwriting in this case. I would just say it's just the genre of music that it is. However, I would say that the closing track, Won't Back Down, was just awful. I would call that lazy songwriting. They didn't put any effort into it. It's just so lazy and boring, and I feel like it hurts the album a lot because you get to the end of it, you're waiting to see where it's going to go, because it does kind of have a linear sort of story or a cohesive thought process to it from front to back until you get to the back. Then they just couldn't think of what else to say. They couldn't think of how to close it, so they just threw on this horrible song. And we also have a lot of bands, literally hundreds of bands and thousands of songs that are COVID and pandemic themed. But this whole album stood out to me a lot underneath that compass because I feel like it's just so different. It doesn't sound like somebody that's standing on a soapbox yelling at me. It's a lot less judgmental. Even though we have a song like Bad Man, it still isn't like he needs to burn in hell and he needs to die. It's just like, dude, he's a bad man. He's just, it's just what it is. He's a bad man. He's super sad. And again, it's not overly judgmental. It doesn't sound like it's full of hate, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like a lot of people who were screaming about how much they hated the way how people were acting, their music has just a lot of hate within it as well. And it's just kind of the same thing. They're just repeating the same thing over and over again. And I feel like, sure, this album does that, but just does it a little bit different in their own way. And that kind of raised it up for me a little bit more. Because when I heard the first couple songs and I got the feel for what it was about, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. But after a while, I was like, you know what, this one's a little bit different. So with all that said, I gotta give Divisive by the band Disturbed a 5.8 out of 10. But I want to know what you guys think, especially if you're a Disturbed fan, or even if you hate Disturbed and you're just more familiar with their music, because I obviously am not. So yeah, leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of Divisive. Let me know where you feel like it fits amongst all their other albums, what your favorite song is, and what you would rate it. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to give it a like. If you want to help support me and my channel, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell icon that we don't miss out on any of my future videos. And while you're down there, let me know how you thought of this album. Don't forget to let me know what you want me to review next. Doing any of that stuff helps me out tremendously, especially with YouTube's just forever changing algorithm. I appreciate you guys for taking time out of your day to listen to me talk about music. And I hope you have a good rest of your day or night whenever you have me watching this. And I will talk to you guys next time. I was